What's going on, everyone? Ta-da. And this obviously derives from One Piece chapter 1016, where we find out some more information about Wano, but not that much, where Kaido all but confirms that Wano is indeed special and he chose Wano for a particular reason. So that stood out to me, not only because of that comment, but because of signs and different things that's been said up to this point that has pretty much told us that Wano is special, but we're still trying to figure out exactly why. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole of Wano and the history of Wano and everything leading up to this point to try to discern exactly what's going on here and why exactly is Kaido occupying Wano. So on its surface, I think it's pretty obvious, like the resources and weapons and the fact that it's closed off does aid Kaido's agenda and everything he's trying to accomplish, but I think it's much deeper than that. But before we talk about that, aid my agenda and sub to the channel, okay? I would really appreciate that. Drop a like as well. And without further ado, let's talk about Wano and why it's special. We know Wano is a country of isolationism, right? Where they were cut off from the world. But as we've read more of the story, it's been uncovered that Wano was originally a part of the rest of the world, which we would presume, right? But Wano being isolated, it does help and hurt in different ways. Every time I think about isolation and Wano, how it's tied together, I think of Whitebeard and Oden and how they view freedom. I don't think it's about that, but that's what I think about, where Whitebeard loved Wano because it was cut off from the rest of the world and the world government could not interfere. Oden hated Wano because Wano was cut off from the rest of the world and he couldn't explore anywhere else. But again, I think isolation has a part to do with Kaido choosing it, but we also can't forget about what Wano is perceived to be to the rest of the world. We can't forget about Ryuma in the past, in which he was fending off people trying to invade Wano because Wano was known as the City of Gold. So people were trying to plunder Wano for their resources. Moria was successful because he managed to get Shusui, but then that ties into the craftsmanship of Wano. First off, sea stone, that's where you get it, Wano, and that's the only place in which you can basically put sea stone into anything, right? So that shows you the value of occupying Wano, or just why people would want to be in Wano. When we mentioned craftsmanship as well, some of the most amazing weapons in the story were made in Wano. Enma, Amino Habikiri, Shusui, Waruichi Monji. So craftsmanship is very prevalent in Wano, because then that also ties into the Kozuki, in which they are the creators of the poneglyphs. Speaking of the poneglyphs, this goes back to ancient knowledge, right? Where the Kozuki, they're tied to the ancient kingdom and they created the poneglyphs. The poneglyphs, they are basically remnants of the history and telling us exactly what went on, but basically they're keys to a puzzle. So looking at that picture, where we have the makers of the poneglyphs isolated from the rest of the world, because essentially they're the people that can translate what's going on these poneglyphs. And because of how important these poneglyphs are, you would want that to be separate from the world because of what transpired, whereas the world government or the kings that took over, they discarded the history. And so in a way to protect this history, you have to basically cut that key off from the rest of the world, that key being the Kozuki clan. And it's really no coincidence that the Kozuki, they passed down that knowledge, being able to transcribe poneglyphs and basically being top tier stonemasons. Oden was a top tier stonemason as a child, and he wasn't able to pass that down to Momonosuke. But Momonosuke is special in his own right, in which he can communicate with Zunisha. So maybe it's not necessary, but there's a lot more to get to here, okay? So when you think about Wano's geography and how Wano is basically a fortress, and the only means of getting into Wano is very difficult, but Wano is isolated and even getting there is difficult. So I don't think this is a coincidence. I think Wano was directly cut off, not only politically, but I think physically. I think Wano could have been moved from its original place, personally, and that fortress could have been essentially created. I don't think it's crazy to say an island being moved, because we still don't know where God's Valley is, and we're seeing Onigashima being moved right now. That was just an observation of mine. Just looking at Wano and how difficult it is to get in there is pretty interesting. So to recap, isolationism, craftsmanship with the sea stone and the weapons, top tier weapons, mind you, the ancient knowledge that they have there and they were trying to preserve, the geography, and of course Ryuma trying to protect these resources. And so those are some ways in which Wano is special. That brings us to Toki. Toki's one of those characters that we know should have been utilized a lot better, but I don't think her story is over. So this sometimes is overlooked, and I don't know why. When we met Toki said her goal was to go to Wano, even though her parents were from Wano. But when they asked her where she's from, she's like, I don't know. But we also know that Toki's an Amatsuki. And Amatsuki, they're one of the clans that serve the Kozuki. So when you think of all this, and I have a crazy theory of Bon Clay being an Amatsuki and him migrating from Wano for safety reasons. And I think that's the same thing for Toki, where her family, they're originally from Wano, but I think certain people were left in Wano to preserve the history of Wano. But something Toki also said is that she fled from the past because Toki, remember, she was born 800 years ago. So how do you explain that? Her parents are from Wano. She was dressed in Wano garb because Oden commented on how she was dressed, saying, hey, I was trying to leave Wano, but now the first person I met outside of Wano is dressed exactly like people are if they were from Wano. But Toki had never been there. So obviously the customs and the culture her parents passed down to her. But okay, why did you flee the past? There are two things that I could surmise from that, okay? One was Toki was running from her destiny because even when she met Oden, she said, yeah, my destination is Wano, but being with you, it makes me feel like I'm already there, meaning I've already reached my destination. But if you're fleeing from something, so then that could tie into fate and things happening even though you're trying to avoid it. Whereas her goal was to do something great by finding a certain person. She ended up doing that either way because she was fleeing the country. The other possible explanation is that Toki was fleeing because that's when the war started. And for her to save herself and save her own life, she fled to the future like she was about to do when Oden found her. When she was running away from karma, I believe, she was about to jump forward into the future again. So there are things we have to figure out about Toki there, but I have something with that I'll address at the end. Another hint, Roger desperately wanted to meet someone from Wano. So Roger, through his journey, never went to Wano before he went with Oden, obviously. Roger had been sailing for years to the point that he went to Lodestar and back, and he still hadn't gone to Wano because Wano again was isolated. And I think this is important because Akainu did not want to go to Wano because of the possible reputation of Wano, where it's like, you know what, we have to be careful before going there. And Roger didn't say this, but I think based on the fact that he didn't go there, but he was really interested in it, shows that Ryuma, through everything that he did, people were wary of that reputation. But something about Roger, right, that we have to factor in is that he has insane instinct and insane feelings. And for him, he was like, I have to meet someone from Wano. So when the news was going around about Oden, he's like, oh, a samurai from Wano? I desperately have to meet him. So that's a hint in itself. And even if we go back, this is a popular story trope in which it somewhat foreshadows something being special, where the conversation, and some people argue the best chapter in One Piece ever, 957, where they talk about everyone gathering in Wano, all these big names gathering in Wano for a particular reason. And Sengoku hints that it can't be a coincidence, where for Sengoku, I wonder, how much does he know about the ancient history? So going from there, we get to Kaido, and Kaido basically choosing Wano as a place in which he is going to lay his foundation. We know for Kaido, he got his start by partnering with Orochi, but how did he meet Orochi? For Orochi in particular, he got his start from the old hag. And something that some people noticed, most should know by this point, that when the old hag was transforming into different characters, she transformed into Shiki. So then based on the old hag, her demeanor, Kaido, Orochi, this is my conclusion. The old hag is the one who brokered the deal between Orochi and Kaido. And the reason why she was able to do that is because the old hag, she has ties with Shiki, and Shiki was the one who told Kaido more about Wano. I think Kaido personally knows about Joy Boy and the ancient history, but he doesn't know as much as Oden did, obviously because they found the One Piece, where Oden knows about Wano and it being open again, but Kaido knows about Joy Boy. So essentially for Kaido, there's no doubt in my mind that he found out more about Wano from Rocks and being a part of that crew. And I think Shiki could have something to do with God's Valley. I don't want to jump too far into Kaido's history in regards to his connection with Wano and his possible lineage, because we know his devil fruit was given to him by Big Mom. So it's just too far a leap to say that he's connected to the dragon that Ryuma cut down over the capital. But I think for certain Kaido knows Joy Boy is the key. And I think Joy Boy is essentially the key to connect these great powers. So for instance, I think Joy Boy, whomever he is, would be able to control or communicate with not only Poseidon. I think the purpose of Joy Boy is to communicate with these ancient weapons, not to control, but communicate and work in tandem with to bring the world back together again. I think Kaido knows just enough to know that Wano is the key because, for instance, the Kazuki, they're the ones who transcribe the ancient text. The Oharans, they are X factors because they should not exist. They learned the ancient language, but the ancient language was supposed to be lost with the Kazuki. That's why everything was isolated. That's why Big Mom and Kaido, they've been discussing Nico Robin, and that throws an interesting wrinkle into this because the key was supposed to be in Wano. The key is the Kazuki clan, the people who created the poneglyphs, so they should be able to understand and bring everything together, but we can't use them yet until Joy Boy returns to Wano, because then everything will be in place with Shirahoshi, Poseidon, Zunisha. Then we can finally make a move and use the key that is the Kazuki. That's why Oden was supposed to pass down the information to Momonosuke, but I think everything has worked out as it's supposed to because Momonosuke ended up being a special case, which works out in the perfect time with Luffy and him essentially, in my opinion, being Joy Boy. So in conclusion, after all that, I think Kaido chose Wano because he knows Wano is the key to more power. Where he got this information, I'm assuming rocks. Has Kaido read Oden's journal? I don't think so. I think Oden's journal has so much information that Kaido would not have tried to kill Momonosuke. When we think back to Kaido and Momonosuke in that burning castle, I think Kaido hesitated because it's been confirmed that Momonosuke and Yamato, they're the same age. So essentially when he saw Momonosuke at that age, and he even said, "You're reciting the dream that someone put into your mouth," it makes me think of Yamato and Kaido, where he's essentially trying to make Yamato become the Shogun of Wano, even though she obviously doesn't want to. So yeah, I mean, things are going to be revealed more and more, but I think just based off of all this information, it's clear. Everything lies within Wano. Even when you think about the locations of the poneglyphs, Zo, Wano, Fishman Island, everything is connected, but Wano is essentially the key. That's why it was cut off, because you can't just have the key laying around. You have to protect the key from the rest of the world because it's not time yet. Because if the wrong person got a hold of the key, then they could destroy it, then it's lost forever. How does the world government tie into it? Well, I think certain people know of this history, and that's why they're trying to broker deals with Orochi and Kaido just getting into the country, because I think once they find out or figure out what's going on there, things may be even more exciting. Because something I came across just rereading all of this was Oden said there will be a war 20 years later that may even split the seas. And I'm like, okay, the fight right now that they're having, do they mean that literally or is it figuratively? Because when I think of splitting the seas, I'm like, okay, is Blackbeard gonna show up? Are other people gonna show up? Because right now the war is not nearly to that magnitude. Are other people expected to be there? So maybe that's something we can talk about another day. But guys, give me your thoughts. Why do you think Kaido chose Wano? Why do you think Wano is special? Leave me your thoughts, drop a comment for Miss Algo. Make sure to like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter at BragoDAce. Follow me on Instagram at BragoD.Ace. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Guys, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
I start doubting me, I felt lost. I rewrite it.